1 minute ago, Kash Patel goes public with threatening text messages. Lawyer Diddy immediately falls into the trap. The federal courtroom, known as Chamber 12, was unusually tense. The air felt electrified, thick with whispers, sideways glances, and the subtle shuffle of legal documents. It wasn't just another high-profile case. This was the trial of Sean Diddy Combs, music mogul entrepreneur, and now the centerpiece of one of the most explosive criminal proceedings in modern memory. But today the story had shifted. No longer just about Diddy, it was about something deeper: identity power and the terrifying reach of influence. At the heart of the day's chaos stood Kash Patel, Special Prosecutor for the federal government. Unlike the defense attorneys in sleek charcoal suits, Kash wore a tailored navy ensemble, polished yet combative. He didn't need theatrics. His eyes did enough damage. He stood behind the lectern, flanked by 2 assistants and a sealed briefcase. His voice, when it finally broke, the tension was calm, too calm. "Before we begin," Patel said, "the court must rule on a matter that will shape the safety of every person who dares speak truth in this chamber." From the defense table, Mark Agnello, Diddy's lead attorney, leaned forward. "Your Honor, this is precisely the kind of delay we're objecting to. Witnesses can't hide behind masks of anonymity. This is a courtroom, not a masquerade." Gasps rippled. Somewhere near the back, juror number 6, a tall man with a skeptical scowl, nodded in visible agreement. Judge Halberg held up a hand. "Mr. Patel, proceed." Kash stepped forward, slow and deliberate. He opened the briefcase. "Last night," he said, lifting a thick folder, "we intercepted a series of encrypted messages sent from an anonymous proxy server. These were not ordinary communications. These were requests, demands, payments." He clicked a remote. A screen flickered on. Strings of coded text appeared, followed by a translation overlay. "Need list of testifiers, especially Jane. High priority. Wire sent. Double if delivered by Friday. Target safe house near Red Rock. Coordinates confirmed." Murmurs grew louder. The jury shifted uneasily. Kash didn't flinch. These messages were accompanied by cryptocurrency transactions totaling $50,000, all routed through dummy shell accounts. "This isn't coincidence. This is coordination." He turned. "This isn't just about Diddy. This is about someone or a group with access, reach, and zero regard for life." Agnello shot up. "Speculation, Your Honor. This is nothing more than fear-mongering. Unless Mr. Patel has evidence directly linking these messages to my client, it's inadmissible." But Patel was ready. He brought up a photo. It was grainy but clear enough to recognize a familiar face, a known associate of Diddy's security team, caught on a parking lot camera near the Red Rock safe house just 3 days prior. "I don't care if it was Diddy himself," Patel said, voice rising, "his handler, his intern, or a ghostwriter. What I care about is this: Jane's life is in danger, and so are the lives of others brave enough to testify." Judge Halberg leaned back, fingers steepled. "And your recommendation, Mr. Patel? We allow pseudonyms to protect those at risk. We keep the courtroom open, but we shield names. No faces shown in public transcripts." The courtroom buzzed again. Journalists whispered into phones. A camera flash blinked. Agnello shook his head. Then unexpectedly, juror number 6 raised a hand. "Your Honor, if I may." A silence dropped. "This trial is about truth," he said. "If we start hiding who's saying what, how do we know what's real? How do I, as a juror, trust a voice without a name?" Patel didn't miss a beat. "Because truth isn't in a name," he replied. "It's in the story. It's in the pain. It's in the risk someone takes to say, 'This happened to me,' even when they know it could get them killed." Judge Halberg glanced between the men, then to the projection still glowing behind Patel. "We will reconvene after a recess," he announced. "Until then, I urge all parties to consider the weight of what we're protecting. This court adjourns for 1 hour." As the gavel struck, the room broke into hushed chaos. Lawyers huddled. Reporters darted for the exits. Jurors whispered among themselves. But Kash Patel remained still, eyes locked on juror number 6. This was no longer about Diddy. This was about what silence costs and who's willing to pay for the truth to disappear. The courtroom reconvened after a brief recess. Sunlight streaming through tall windows cast sharp lines across the polished floor. Silence hung thick, almost predatory. Judge Halberg took his seat first. Kash Patel and Mark Agnello were next, faces locked in quiet calculation. Juror number 6 looked gravely ahead, still unsettled. Judge Halberg opened his notebook. "Let's resume. Counsel, you may proceed." Kash rose, clasping a single sheet of paper. "Your Honor, an additional piece of evidence was obtained this afternoon." His tone held steel. He passed the paper to the clerk. Then, with a practiced click, he projected a timeline on the screen behind him. May 3, 2024. Cryptocurrency payment initiated $10,000. May 4, encrypted follow-up message confirmed Jane safe. May 5, physical envelope dropped at secure Dropbox in Las Vegas. A hush fell. Kash continued. These transactions, 3 in total, totaling $100,000, all traceable back to shell accounts controlled by individuals with direct links to Diddy's touring company. Mark stood abruptly. "Your Honor, again speculative. We have no proof Diddy signed or authorized these transfers. This is hearsay and circumstantial." Kash didn't flinch. He clicked again. The projection shifted to a surveillance photo. A black SUV, tinted windows, disembarking in Vegas. Same make and license plate seen near the trial site earlier that day. "All proof I need," he said softly. "Location triangulation, transaction timestamps, anonymous drops." Anticipation crackled between the defense table and jury box. Kash leaned in. "Let me be blunt. Someone connected to Diddy or acting on his behalf attempted to coerce silence from key witnesses, from Jane, from others. The documents show attempts to buy testimony. That undermines the very bedrock of justice." The camera lenses clicked. Reporters collected furious notes. A murmur rose near Juror 6. He glanced at the screen, then Kash. Something shifted in his eyes, doubt. Judge Halberg paused the exchange. "Does the defense wish to cross-examine this exhibit?" Mark studied the screen, then slowly sat. He remained silent. The evidence stood. Kash continued softer now. "We didn't file this earlier because..." He took a breath. "We feared it'd taint the jury. We feared it'd intimidate people attempting to do right." He paused. His gaze swept the courtroom. "But secrecy now is surrender. We cannot allow hush money to rewrite reality." Rena Roy, seated with the press corps, whispered to Shauna Lloyd. Shauna nodded, her face unreadable. They exchanged glances of unspoken questions. "What now?" Kash pressed on. "Protecting identities is not obstruction, it's protection. These aren't idle threats, they're bullets in digital form. People fear going public. They fear retribution. We will not throw their lives into the ring." A final slide appeared, a quote from an anonymous message. "Tell her we can make it go away. She stays quiet. Life goes back to normal. No name, no face." A pin drop hush. Mark rose again. His voice was low, calculated. "Your Honor, the defense will request a thorough review of these files. Chain of custody. We must verify authenticity. We don't convict based on innuendo." Judge Halberg nodded. "Mr. Patel, prepare full disclosure to defense by tomorrow. Court will seal this exhibit until verification." The judge leaned forward. "Now, proceed with scheduled witness." Kash exhaled, visibly releasing tension. He took his seat, gaze fixed on Juror 6. Later that day, they called Jane back in. This time she wore a mask. Her voice wavered, but her resolve was steel. She looked toward Kash, then toward jury. "I want to tell the truth. I came here not to speak fearfully, but to be heard." Kash offered a discreet nod. She began softly. "Last year I got a message, no sender name. It said, 'We saw your interview.' That shook me. Then came the money request. I ignored it. I left town. A juror in the back shifted uncomfortably. Jane continued, I won't lie. I was scared. This wasn't just about money. It was about control. She paused, measured her words. I found the strength to speak up because I believe in something bigger than any man's power. Kash rose silently at her words, offering no interruption. The defense attorney approached her with a folder. Ms. Jane, didn't you accept money in the past rent gifts flights? She met his eyes. Those were from tours, from the dynamic, not hush money. The courtroom leaned in. Mark changed tack. Did you ever consider leaving? Staying silent might have been easier. Jane's eyes glistened. Easier, no. That's not justice, not for anyone else. At that moment, Judge Halberg closed the exchange. Thank you, Ms. Jane. You may step down. As Jane left, Kash watched her walk out, unmasked, unbroken. The courtroom's rhythm felt different now. The jury looked pensive, defense less confident. Kash Patel turned to face the jury. He couldn't speak yet, but his presence said it all. They had taken the first blow. By the third day of arguments, the courtroom felt like a stage. The roles were set, the script unstable, and the stakes unspeakably real. Special Prosecutor Kash Patel entered with a new air of resolve. Gone was the hesitant calculation. He walked like a man who knew he wasn't just presenting facts, he was defending lives. At the defense table, Mark Agnello whispered intently to his co-counsel. Juror number 6 avoided eye contact, jaw set tight. Judge Halberg opened proceedings with a deep breath. Mr. Patel, you may resume. Kash approached the podium and turned toward the jury. We've heard about encrypted messages, bribes, threats. Now let's talk about motive. He clicked his remote. The screen behind him displayed 3 images, side by side, a smiling Jane in an old photo, a bank transaction statement, and a grainy still of a man placing an envelope under a door. These are not isolated incidents. This is a pattern, a system, a machine built to silence people. He gestured toward Jane, seated quietly with 2 U.S. Marshals nearby. She didn't just walk away from a music empire, she fled, because someone made her choose between truth and survival. Kash turned to the judge. Your Honor, the government calls its next witness, Agent Maritza Valen, Cyber Division DOJ. A composed woman in her 40s took the stand, crisp in a dark blazer. She swore in and adjusted the mic. Kash nodded. Agent Valen, please describe what your team uncovered, Valen began. We tracked over 17 cryptocurrency transactions originating from 6 shell entities, all connected to LLCs based in Delaware and the Cayman Islands. Funds were funneled to anonymous accounts linked to known fixers in the entertainment sector. Were any of these fixers connected to the defendant? Yes. 2 of them previously worked security for Combs Enterprises. A rustle swept through the room. Were any messages recovered? Valen nodded. Yes, a total of 112. Most were cryptic code phrases like handle red or package east by dawn, but cross-referencing dates and locations matched them to events testified by Jane. Kash, in your expert opinion, were these instructions? Absolutely, orders. Kash thanked her and stepped aside. Agnello rose for cross. Agent Valen, did Sean Combs write any of those messages? No, sir. Was his name in any of the transactions? No direct mention. Mark smiled faintly. So it could have been anyone. Anyone with access to his infrastructure, yes. Kash stood. Redirect, did the use of Diddy's staff vehicles and funding sources suggest internal coordination? Valen, absolutely. This wasn't random. It was an intentional use of proximity and power. Kash let that hang in the air, then turned to the jury. It doesn't matter who hit send. What matters is who enabled the system. At recess, murmurs exploded in the press row. Some reporters stared at the screen in disbelief. Others typed furiously. A Fox correspondent muttered, "This just turned federal." Back inside, Judge Hallberg reconvened the session with a new caution. Mr. Patel, continue. Kash's voice dropped to a quieter register. We now move to witness protection protocols, because we believe more witnesses may have been compromised. He pulled out a sealed folder and handed it to the judge. We request emergency sealed status for 2 upcoming witnesses. Both were previously contacted by individuals offering bribes. Judge Hallberg opened the file, brows furrowed. Mark objected. Your Honor, this is prejudicial. The jury will assume guilt based on secrecy alone. Kash countered no. They'll assume danger, because that's what it is. Judge Hallberg deliberated briefly, then nodded. Sealed status granted. Jury will be removed during these testimonies. Gasps. Even Juror 6 blinked, finally looking at Patel. As the courtroom cleared, Mark leaned toward his client, whispering. Diddy stared ahead, expression unreadable. The sealed testimony began behind closed doors. Patel emerged an hour later, face tight. Reporters caught him in the hallway. Mr. Patel, what's your next move? He paused. The truth doesn't need applause. It needs protection. And walked on. Back inside, Judge Hallberg addressed the jury. We are entering a volatile chapter. I urge all of you to reserve judgment until all facts are presented. The next slide Patel displayed was simple. It's not about hiding names. It's about saving futures. Rain tapped against the courthouse windows the next morning. The storm outside mirrored the tension within. Special Prosecutor Kash Patel stood alone in the hallway, rehearsing his words without sound. Inside, the gallery was fuller than ever. Additional press passes had been issued. Protesters outside shouted in support of Jane, while a smaller group defended Diddy's rights. The courtroom had become more than a legal battleground. It was now the epicenter of a national cultural war. Judge Hallberg entered, and the room snapped to attention. Counsel, let's proceed with today's agenda. Kash stood locking eyes briefly with Juror 6, then turned toward the bench. Your Honor, we call witness 214. There was a moment's hesitation as a figure in plain clothes entered from a side door escorted by 2 federal marshals. The witness, known only as 214, was granted full anonymity. Even the court stenographer recorded only a pseudonym. The man's voice, slightly modulated, cut through the courtroom. I worked for a subcontractor assigned to logistics for events managed by Combs Enterprises. Kash nodded. Were you ever instructed to destroy evidence? The man hesitated. Yes. I was told to wipe devices, to use a magnetizer, to burn paper copies. Who gave those instructions? The room leaned in. A man named Marlon Keyes. He was head of venue operations and oversaw Diddy's Inner Circle's asset protection. Was Mr. Combs aware of these actions? 214 paused. He didn't issue orders, but he was present. He watched. He never stopped it. The courtroom fell into an uneasy silence. Juror 6 scribbled something, then underlined it. Kash walked carefully. Can you tell us about the coded documents? 214 pulled out a small printout. This is what we called a red sheet. It listed initials, dates, payouts. He handed it to the bailiff. The document, once projected, showed a list, JDAKMS, alongside large monetary amounts and phrases like settled pre-stage or silence 722. Agnello stood to object. Your Honor, this list lacks context. These could be business payments, settlements from disputes unrelated to criminal matters. Kash responded before the judge could. Then why is there a line here that reads, 40K post-questioning? Why use aliases? Why burn receipts? The judge allowed it. 214 continued. We had a vault, not metaphorical, a literal room. Soundproofed underground biometric access. Mark scoffed. A secret room. This is a thriller script. Kash responded calmly. Yet here we are with a burned drive recovered from that very room, partially decrypted by DOJ techs. Gasps broke out in the gallery. Next on the stand was a former assistant, only identified as Mara. Her voice quivered as she recounted the listening culture. We were told to report every staff conversation. Suspicion meant termination. Was there ever retaliation against someone who didn't comply? Mara nodded, eyes glassy. A woman named Kiara, she said no to an NDA. Next day her apartment was broken into, her dog poisoned. Mara turned to the jury. She was never the same. She moved states, changed her name. Mark stood looking fatigued. No police report was filed. This is hearsay. Mara responded, voice steady now, because she was warned police can't help you where he reaches. Kash let the silence carry. At the end of the day, Judge Hallberg recessed the court with a weary sigh. Tomorrow both parties will make preliminary closing statements before final testimony. Outside press swarmed. News vans ran breaking banners. Vault room confirmed in Diddy trial. Anonymous witness ties. Inner circle to suppression. That evening Kash Patel held a quiet press briefing. What we're seeing is not just one man's choices. It's a fortress of silence funded and enforced. Meanwhile, Mark Agnello spoke at a separate briefing. We are watching a narrative weaponized without direct evidence. Mr. Combs has not been directly linked by signature order or command. But public sentiment was shifting. Juror 6, who had once looked skeptical, was now visibly shaken, quieter, more distant. In the shadows of the courtroom, a reckoning loomed. And with the next day promising final arguments, the line between truth and legend would blur into one undeniable conclusion: someone somewhere would have to answer. The next morning the courtroom swelled with unease. National attention turned into global fascination. Foreign press appeared. Cameras flashed as legal commentators speculated on what would be revealed next. Special Prosecutor Kash Patel, flanked by a new security detail, stood confidently in front of a screen, displaying a simple message: final reckoning. Judge Hallberg gave the floor. Mr. Patel, you may begin. Kash's voice was low but deliberate. The prosecution has 3 final components. The first, documented attempts to reach jurors, particularly Juror 6. Gasps. Juror 6's head snapped up. The courtroom froze. We received a packet anonymously, Patel continued. Inside were surveillance photos. Notes scribbled with phrases like, flippable, lost daughter in 19, weak point housing debt. He held up the folder. This was mailed to a burner address, tracked to a known associate of Mr. Combs, currently in custody on unrelated charges. Mark Agnello jumped up. Objection. Baseless. Completely prejudicial. Judge Hallberg reviewed the folder, face pale. I'll allow it for now. Kash nodded to the bailiff, who wheeled in a sealed box. He opened it to reveal a disassembled listening device. This was recovered from the juror room ceiling tile. Silence, unregistered, untraceable, but placed by someone who knew the layout. He turned toward Diddy's table. We are not saying Mr. Combs placed it. We are saying this trial's integrity has been violated by forces connected to his environment. Juror 6 filed a request for temporary relocation after court. Judge Hallberg approved it immediately. That afternoon, the prosecution called its last witness, DHS liaison Marcus Lee. Lee walked slowly, grim. I led interagency coordination between ICE DOJ and DHS, following threats to witnesses. We intercepted an audio memo between 2 unidentified individuals discussing payouts and leaks. He played the recording, distorted but clear. Voice 1. He'll fold if the girl folds. Voice 2. She won't. Then we pull the lever, house visit, just scare. Kash turned to the jury. This was sent 2 weeks before Jane testified, and 3 days before her car brakes were cut. Whispers filled the air. The tension peaked. Agnello objected. No proof of involvement, pure conjecture. But the jury's expressions had changed. During cross, Agnello tried to spin it. Agent Lee, could this be staged? A planted memo, Lee responded, everything is possible, but everything is not probable. The answer stuck. Outside, a new group appeared, former employees of Combs Enterprises. They held signs reading, "We were silenced. Believe the vault." Inside, the defense began their counterstrike. Mark Agnello stood before the jury. "This case has turned into a witch hunt," he declared. None directly ties Sean Combs to any crime. Suspicion is not guilt." He clicked to a slide labeled "Reasonable Doubt." Anonymous sources, no names, hearsay, encrypted messages without ownership. He looked straight into Juror 6's eyes. Justice demands more than innuendo. It demands proof. Later, the defense called Diddy's longtime accountant. The man presented clean ledgers showing legitimate expenses and audits. "Where did the $40K from the red sheet go?" Kash asked on cross. "To a vendor for a venue cancellation fee." "Which vendor?" I'll need to check records." "Isn't that the same amount Jane said was paid after her deposition?" I don't know." That "I don't know" echoed. Not damning, but not clean. By day's end, Judge Hallberg ordered a 24-hour recess before closing arguments. Outside, a banner flew from a plane overhead. "Bauer, protect Jane." Inside the building, silence lingered long after the gavel struck. The storm was coming. Daybreak brought silence, but no calm. The courthouse steps were lined with a mix of fury, and flashing cameras. Final arguments loomed, and no one knew which direction the scales of justice would tilt. Inside, Judge Hallberg gave his final instructions to the jury. "You are the last line. Do not weigh personality. Do not measure popularity. Weigh the evidence. That is your charge." Kash Patel took the floor first. His suit was pressed, his words razor-sharp. "This case is not about what Mr. Combs wanted us to see," he began. "It's about what he worked so hard to hide." He walked to the projector and clicked through the anonymous messages. The surveillance footage, the redacted audio threats, the vault map. "We are not saying Sean Combs pulled the trigger. We are saying he built the room, bought the gun, and told his team to watch the clock." Kash paused. "We are saying Jane is not a theory. She is a person. And so are the other unnamed witnesses who will live with the cost of this story long after the headlines fade." He closed his binder. No one is above the law, not even the loudest man in the room. He stepped back. The room exhaled. Then it was Mark Agnello's turn. He approached like a boxer entering a final round. "Ladies and gentlemen, if this were a movie, it would be compelling," he started. "But this is real life. And in real life, we don't convict based on shadows." He clicked to his slide, "Burden of proof." "You've heard theories, you've seen fragments, but you've seen no direct action, no order, no command. That's the difference between suspicion and guilt." He paced slowly. "This trial has become a referendum on wealth, celebrity, even power, but none of those things should replace evidence." He turned to the jury. "Sean Combs is not on trial for being influential. He's on trial for things the prosecution can't prove he did." The jury deliberated for nearly 9 hours. Pizza boxes came. Arguments were heard through the walls. At 10:42 p.m., the bailiff emerged. "We have a verdict." The room refilled in seconds. Reporters readied their feeds. Phones buzzed in pockets. Judge Hallberg returned to the bench. "Will the defendant please rise?" Sean Diddy Combs stood unreadable. Kash Patel's eyes narrowed. Mark Agnello folded his hands. The four-person Juror 6 stood, voice steady, almost too steady. "On count 1, witness tampering, we find the defendant guilty. On count 2, obstruction of justice, guilty. On count 3, conspiracy to intimidate a hung jury." Shock rippled through the gallery. The most serious charge undecided. Kash nodded, unsurprised. He had predicted that complexity might save count 3. Judge Hallberg thanked the jury and dismissed them. "This court recognizes the weight of your work." Outside headlines erupted, "Guilty Diddy. Convicted on tampering, obstruction. Justice or just enough." That night, Jane was moved to a secure location. Her face never shown her name, never spoken publicly. but her silence had been heard louder than any microphone. Kash Patel declined interviews, but released one statement. Accountability is not a victory, it's a beginning. Let this mark the end of silence and the start of rebuilding. Sean Combs' legal team filed for appeal within hours, but the moment had landed. In Los Angeles, a candlelight vigil was held outside the old Combs Enterprises building. A former employee stood at the mic. I watched friends lose themselves to secrets. Tonight we reclaim the truth. She lit a match. One by one, candles flickered. And somewhere in the dark, Juror 6 watched from afar. Still anonymous, still haunted, but somehow at peace. Justice, partial or whole, had spoken. The story would never leave them, but neither would their courage.